A very good morning and warm welcome to Money Sense. Hosting with me, Simon Caudry. This morning is Neville Hicks. Good morning, Neville.
Good morning, Simon.
We are delighted to be joined in the studio this morning by a distinguished author and commentator on economic, demographic and investment trends. Michael Falk is a CFA charterholder, investment strategist, consultant and partner at Focus Consulting, who has written the highly respected book, Let's All Learn How to Fish, to sustain long-term economic growth. Now, one of the most pressing and urgent priorities in society today is a lack of knowledge and understanding of finance. Financial literacy is a topic that is dear to the heart of the CFA Institute, which is working around the world to make improvements in understanding of finance by people. Michael, we are delighted to have you on our show to help us understand better the issues and even better, perhaps help us pinpoint potential solutions to the challenges we face in today's world.
Oh, Simon and Neville, it is a pleasure to be with you today.
Well, thank you very much. Now, let's start off right at the beginning. Let's all learn how to fish. Quirky title. Perhaps you could give us some background as to what the reason was for that then.
It's very simple. There's a very, very old proverb. It says, if you give a man a fish, he can eat for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he can eat for the rest of his life. Now, other than the political incorrectness of only teaching men, and we should enjoy this for all people, this is where it comes from. When we talk about financial literacy, which you touched on, and we talk about people's personal finances, which connect with entitlements from the perspective of if they don't handle their finances well and something bad happens in their life, you want society to offer a safety net, if you will. Safety nets are entitlements. Question is our safety nets, which are well-intentioned policies, have they become a bit too seductive? So going back to teaching an individual how to fish, the concept here is as simple as we need to usher in a new era. From entitlement to responsibility with appreciation for those who are unable to take responsibility. So the bottom line is, if society is going to progress economically for the benefit of everyone, we need individuals who are capable to take more responsibility. And society has to have an even greater appreciation for those who are not able. So we want safety nets. But what we also want is we want trampolines. We want people to be able to bounce back instead of simply landing in a net in which they cannot get free of.
Well, this leads to a question, I suppose. When you were writing the book, you're talking about safety nets and you're talking about creating the opportunity for people to succeed and therefore not perhaps need the safety nets. That's, I guess, the essence of it. What was the genesis of the idea in your mind, though, the problem that you saw, the core problem that you saw that created the need in your mind to want to write the book, to explain a problem and to solve a problem? What was that core issue and core difficulty that you saw the world facing?
1991. Specifically, 1991. I'd gotten out of university. I was living at home with my folks, saving my money, as a good financial person should, and everyone else for that matter. And my father was 59 years old. The company he was working for went bankrupt. And at the age of 59, he did not have a level of savings to justify, I'm just going to retire. And I saw the stress as it landed on him, as it landed on my mom and dad's relationship. And I started to question the concept of retirement is maybe a false goal, that the average person is not able to financially prepare for a period of non-working, which could be 2-3 decades in reality. So that was step one. Fast forward, there's something wrong with retirement. 2011, in the United States, August 2011, the first serious debt ceiling day for the U.S. government, in which the U.S. government was haggling over whether or not they were going to actually pay their debts. The most powerful country in the world was thinking about how are we going to handle our debts? And that was so wrong. So I published a missive. It was an 8-page, we can jokingly call it a manifesto, about entitlements and the cost to society. It got picked up. And that was the germ that led to the disease, which has now become this book. 1991 to 2011, 20 years later, and then a couple of sequence of events, and the next thing you know, I'm an author.
So, jumping in here, it's interesting. you talk about retirement, and you go back 20 years ago, and there was London Life Freedom 55, and now even in Cayman they've moved the pension age up to now 65. Is retirement in itself, is that a fallacy? Is that a baby boomer existence that millennials and younger generations just will not achieve or have no aspirations in essence to this quote unquote perfect kind of retirement goal?
You make it sound so negative, Neville. First of all, we have to have a little understanding on where did retirement come from.
We try to be positive on this show. Well,
yes,
sometimes.
we're trying. Right. So let's get a little framing for where did retirement originate? Late 19th century, Germany, then the United States. Now, the concept was at a certain point in someone's life cycle, be it 65, be it 60, be it 55, be it 70, pick your age, I don't care. At a certain point, you have used up all of your productive capacity. That is what retirement stood for when it was created. And as a result, if you had no more productive capacity, well, then you can't work. So what do we call it? Actually, in the United States, there's a funny story, not completely certain if it's true, but there's a funny story, and that was that the unemployment rate in the 1890s was quite high. And so the government essentially gerrymandered the unemployment statistics and said people above a certain age weren't unemployed, they were retired. And they actually fixed the problem real quick. Bottom line, think the economy back then. It was agrarian. We were just starting to shift towards manufacturing. Manufacturing started taking hold in the late 19th century into the early to mid 20th century. Agrarian. Farmers, people 60, 65, they had no productive capacity left. That is very hard work. Manufacturing, in the early days, very hard work. So the problem is, retirement as it originally created had some logic behind it. It hasn't evolved in any way the way our economies have. That's the problem.
Well, there's a linkage. There's another point to make on that, actually, is when some of the first retirement systems were designed, they were actually designed to kick in after people had died.
Right, with social services.
So in other words, no one was actually expected to get
to live
retirement.
Past 65.
Yeah.
Right.
So you were expected to never actually get these things, and therefore they would never have a funding problem because they were always going to be funded because you would always be dead before you're claiming them.
Oh, it's even worse than that.
Which actually makes perfect sense.
1935, Social Security was signed into act in the U.S., became live for real in 1937. Retirement age was 65 at the time, and only men were eligible. Life expectancy was roughly 60, 62 based upon statistics that you look at. So it was life expectancy plus 3 to 5 years. Really nice to be able to send out checks after you're dead. I don't think anybody's going to be able to cash those. Not a very effective program, would you say?
Do you think there's a number of problems that we can come to address and talk about, but humor me on this one. Is the fundamental problem that people don't understand what a retirement system is? In that people have assumed because of the dint of recent history that their parents have received a decent pension from a firm they worked for 40 years, and that's helped them out for 15 years or whatever their lifespan is. And people make the presumption that they will be the same, whereas the world has moved on dramatically. Now I was doing some analysis actually before this. I found out that my life expectancy at birth was, I think, as a UK person, 67, and the life expectancy of someone now is 82 years. So in obviously just a short number of years, that life expectancy is increased by 15 years. And that's the fundamental, and yet we talk around in our industry and in our governments, we talk about, that we must move the retirement age by a year. We must move it by, maybe 2 years if we're being brave. What is the fundamental problem here? Is it lack of education, lack of willing to be brave? What is the issue then?
Oh, there's many issues, and they all kind of intersect, and that's the challenge. Every time somebody tries to come up with a solution, they try and tackle one of the aspects instead of the various issues that all level into and fit into that one aspect. So let's give this example. If I say the economy went from agrarian to manufacturing to, we'll call it knowledge-based, we can label it anything we want now, okay? Maybe we go from muscle, right, human power, working with animals, to mechanical, human power working with machines. And what do we say now? Mental?
Mental AI.
Right. So what's happened is everything around us has evolved, but we haven't evolved our thinking whatsoever in terms of retirement, and certainly hasn't kept pace. If I take 1935, age 65, from when Social Security was created, the equivalent age today is 72. If we now start to leverage in the physical capacity of people because of the change of employment, I can push that to 73 plus. So the point is we're dancing around numbers that don't make any sense for society. But the challenge is, if you're a politician, and thankfully maybe none of us are, I don't know you too well enough.
Not yet.
Not yet. No. If you're a politician and you say we're going to go from 65 to 70, 67 to 72, the one thing you can guarantee is you will not be elected. Mm-hmm. The reality is that is a way to stabilize economic production if, and this is a very big if, people are healthy enough to work to an older age and they still have relevant skill sets to get employment, unless they're a sole proprietor. So the challenge here is it's a system way of thinking. We can't just raise the age if we're not going to also care for people's health in our society, as well as care for training, retraining, and ongoing lifelong education. Because then we're going to be left with people who are simply not capable, for whatever reason, to work longer, even if they accept, okay, I have to.
And without wanting to be overly scary or scare-inducing, is the synopsis of what you're saying that if we don't change a system, people's retirement funding will be substantially insufficient, or the refunding systems that governments operate will go bankrupt, and therefore they need to be much more prudent and more careful and more planning, spend more time planning than they currently do? Is that what we're saying?
Yes, and you need not just people to plan more, you need the governments to have better policies and programs to help them and to facilitate this planning. Bottom line, and one of my favorite economist quotes of all time, Herb Stein, that which cannot continue will not. The path we're on is flat out unsustainable. Period. End of story. So we have a choice. We can start changing policies now and make this thing work, which is a reason for optimism, because we know enough to do this. We have to educate the public. This is critical, and it has to be part of the process. But if we wait, we are going to hit a wall that is going to be very, very economically destructive to societies and individuals. And I, for one, say let's choose to fix this now and never even come close to hitting the wall.
Yeah, I think there's a perspective here which is a lot of people in any country will think, oh, well, that only applies to other countries, because they always assume everything's fine for yourself. It seems fine at the moment, but even in Cayman, where we don't have a social security network, not really, people will think, well, we have this private pension system. And I looked at my pension statement today, and I've got 3 years worth of savings in terms of living a lifestyle I'd be comfortable with in my savings pot of a pension, and I've been saving for 20 years. So it's a ridiculous state of affairs. And anybody, and I'll say this candidly, anyone in Cayman who thinks that their pension savings are sufficient to last them during their retirement is ignorant of the facts.
Well, Simon, now hold on. So now you said earlier that you wanted to try and keep this positive. Is that your version of positive?
Yeah.
Well, I just think you need to be realistic as well. We can, without scaring people too much, we need to identify the problems, and then we can try and solve them.
But I think, too, getting back to your point about, starting change and learning to fish, how much of this is bureaucratic and the fact that everyone knows there's an issue. Everyone knows, but no one's doing anything.
Well, before we answer that, we are, as always, in the middle of one of your questions. We are right at the time to take a break. So pause that thought.
Time to think on that.
Pause that thought. He's asked you a complicated question, so we'll give you a 2 minutes break to think it through. Please do rejoin us after the break as we talk again with Michael Falk, author of Let's All Learn How to Fish and partner of Focus Consulting. Welcome back. In the second half of today's show, we are going to continue our conversation on saving the future and ensuring the survival of retirement and healthcare systems with Michael Falk, partner of Focus Consulting and author of the highly respected book, Let's All Learn How to Fish, to sustain long-term economic growth? Michael, again, thank you for joining us. And we cut Neville off mid-question just before we went to the break. So Neville, right straight back over to you.
Yeah, I you're talking a little bit about individuals and what they can do or how they need to address this now. I think anyone who has any sense realizes that this is a massive, huge issue, and this will continue to be until it gets addressed. But no one's doing anything about it. So you almost have this train that's out of control, and it's gonna crash. It's just a matter of when. And the bureaucrats or the politicians, no one wants to say that we're underfunded or that there's issues, that the expected return is completely unrealistic. What causes this Titanic to avoid the iceberg?
Who do we blame?
Who do we
Where do we
blame?
take our pitchforks
Well,
to?
yeah, okay, sure.
Have either of you ever heard the old quote, "You get the government you deserve"? Neville,
We don't talk about governments here.
Do you deserve this? Listen, we as a group elect our bureaucrats, our politicians. And so then we look to them and say, why don't you tell us the truth? They don't tell us the truth ever. So stop asking them to. Their job is to stay in office more often than not. Right? I can't put the point at all of them that they're all ill-effective. Maybe most. But here's the point. We, people, if we respect that we're having a hard time and we can't make this happen on our own, then we need to start being part of the dialogue. We need to use our individual voices to make the politicians comfortable enough to try and do the hard policy, to try and make new regulatory frameworks to allow better programs to come into existence and to retire and unwind the bad programs. They're not going to do it of their own volition. We need to help them do it. And let's take a step back for a moment. What is retirement worth? We talk about the cost. What is it worth? Think about this. You meet someone for the first time. What's the first thing you do? You do a name exchange, right? Who are you? What's the next thing you do? What do you do? Well, imagine yourself as a retiree now, and somebody asks, well, what do you do? Well, I do nothing. I do absolutely nothing. People forget that there are massive psychological and sociological aspects to retirement. Do you know one of the largest growing incidences of divorce is amongst retirees?
Huh.
Right? For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, but not for lunch. 24/7 with your significant other. That's retirement. Do you really want to retire?
You got no distractions, right? So
There's a big part of this. Listen, our social circles. Who we are is largely defined, right or wrong, by what we do. When you're no longer doing and you are retired, you have to find yourself once again. You have to rebuild your relationships once again because you haven't really paid attention to them to the extent of 24/7. The first thing I counsel people on is if you're thinking about retirement, answer one question first. What are you retiring to? Not what are you retiring from? If you can't answer what are you retiring to, then I say you're not ready. Oh, and by the way, if you're married, strongly consider a little counseling before you retire, because that could save your retirement for whatever you have saved. Because think about divorce during retirement. What happens to your assets then?
Well, there's another perspective on retirement, and I don't want to dwell too much on the negatives. And we've already said that people who believe that their retirement savings in a standard pension system will be sufficient are deluding themselves. But the other thing about retirement is when you're retired, and you mentioned this, you're not doing anything. In order to not go stir crazy, you have to start doing something. Mm-hmm. Now, that means you have to start doing something for a lot more hours than you previously had to start doing something because you were working for 8 or 10 hours a day. And doing stuff costs money. So when you're retired, actually, your propensity to spend money probably increases to some extent if you're healthy because you have to do stuff to avoid going completely bonkers.
Yeah, you can also consider what I like to think about is part-time work as part of your retirement and step into retirement slowly before you become fully retired. And now imagine your part-time work. Let's play with this for just a second. Imagine you actually engage in part-time work where you spend your money. So now you get paid a little sum and you get a discount off of the things that you actually spend money. What if you do your part-time work or you have a hobby? You like to golf. What if you do part-time work at a golf club, right? And you get free golf rounds. Or what if you do what could be the most valuable part of all of this? The people who are retiring have experience, they have knowledge, mentor. It's not like the youth of today don't need some additional help beyond what is their traditional schooling. Maybe become a mentor and give back. And people who do this will tell you it's incredibly rewarding. So there are things you can do when you're retired that can add tremendous value in different ways.
I think it's safe to say we've concluded that there is a problem with the retirement system that exists in almost every country.
Yes.
Safe to say we've concluded that.
Well, you want to know how dramatic that is?
No, I definitely don't want to know that. You've already making me nervous about that.
Oh,
So-
no, you're going to like this
No,
one.
I
The
just-
Netherlands. The Netherlands. Strongest pension system in the world. Average funding ratio, which means they have enough money to pay the benefits, is over 100% in the Netherlands. I gave a lecture in the Netherlands about the problem with pensions in November of last year, and they didn't kick me out of the room. They say, we have a problem. They're 100% plus funded, and they acknowledge we have a problem. Now take a society that's 30% funded or 50% funded. Stop the insanity. This isn't going to work. Let's try something different.
Well, because even if you're 100% funded, 100% of what?
Right.
That doesn't mean you can still live.
No.
Just because you funded sufficiently for an actuary to make themselves happy that there's enough money there, doesn't mean that the human can actually survive on that money that the actuary said that you've got in the pot. So that, but I didn't want to go into making me even more scared and nervous. What I really wanted to do, and Neville, you go first.
No, I think, getting back to the question is how, we all recognize there's an issue. And I agree that bureaucrats are not going to do anything. We elect them. What are we going to do, or how are we going to make this change happen? What is the aha tipping point moment where we go as a society? I mean, how do we bring people across various ages, across various employment, across various circumstances together to recognize this is an issue, and how do we address it?
Well, there's a lot of good news here because it's not like there has to be a tipping point where people recognize the issue. People already recognize the issue. When you look at the labor force participation rates, the number of people actually working in the labor force in the U.S. among people over the age of 65, for the last 30 years, it's been growing by like double. People who are older are working already. Millennials, these are not the old people. These are people, let's call it between 20 and 35 years of age. They already know this. They don't expect to be able to retire. And I can ask the question, is that not even a healthier attitude to begin with? The problem then is, are we going to have jobs? Are they going to have the relevant skills to keep working, even if it's part-time? And instead of having a retirement, just have a little bit of an easier life, a little bit less of a grind when you're older. This is not all negative.
Well, we are approaching the end of the show, and we do try to end on a moderately upbeat, or at least not on a downbeat level. In about 2 minutes, what can you tell us of optimism? Where is this? Where is a solution? Where's a pathway to positivity, shall we say?
Healthcare.
Go on.
As shocking as that might strike people. Historically, we have not had health care. We've had sick care. If you're sick or injured, then you get help. That's not health care. Health care is about wellness. With the advent of technology, with what is already here today and what is very proximate next 5 to 10 years, we are going to have dramatically increased health spans, which is the percentage of your total life expectancy in which you are actually healthy. So the good news is we will feel better for longer. We will be healthier for a bigger part of our life. This is incredibly positive. We just have to make sure one thing we take precaution over. Of all the great news in healthcare, there is a massive challenge around the world, and it's called obesity. And the challenge is it is actually starting to turn some life expectancies down. So they're not increasing at the same pace they have. This is a wellness and a healthcare topic. But healthcare is going to get better and better for us individually because of technology and research. and it's ultimately going to cost less as a result.
But it does mean, because people will be getting healthier, even more important to think incredibly seriously about their planning for their future, about their retirement savings, about the money they've put aside, because you're going to be able to enjoy it.
Yeah, become financial literate, have some semblance of understanding about not as much markets, but just general investing information so that you can't get taken advantage of. Pay low fees. Don't pay too much because it's a big deal in terms of your total return over time. And embrace lifelong learning. Don't ever stop learning. That's your best defense.
And it genuinely is never too late to start learning a little bit about financial literacy and financial topics.
Absolutely.
Look, it is always the case on Money Sense that our time seems to run out before we get even close to the meat of the subject. And with you, Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and listening to your discussion about this topic. So thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you both.
Yeah, thank
It's been
you.
great to be here.
Yeah, that's great.
As a final note then, before we leave, I just wish to thank each and every one of our listeners and remind you that today's show will be available as a podcast on the CFA Society Cayman Islands webpage, and encourage anyone who has any question or topic that they wish us to cover to email us at moneysense@candw.ky or tweet us at moneysenseradio. With that, thank you once again, goodbye, and please do tune in to Money Sense again in 2 weeks' time.